Welcome back to Roundtail Restoration, everybody. My name is Chris. This is the top cover for the transmission on my Triumph TR4 that I'm rebuilding. All sorts of engineering going on in here, different spacers and springs and plungers and everything. Got to do some testing to make sure that it selects the gears properly and won't pop out of gear. So we'll get into all that and we'll see how this works. So thanks for watching. Let's get it sorted. Got the top cover here from the overdrive transmission. Like I had mentioned, I'm going to use this in the gearbox, so I don't have to worry about drilling and tapping holes for the interlock switches for the overdrive. It's just something, if I don't have to deal with it, I'm not going to. So there are checks to do with this, and the biggest checks are essentially the resistance. There's balls and springs in here, which I'll show you in a little bit. The resistance of how hard it is to get the transmission in and out of gear. And if the springs are weakened, what will happen, it's just easier for it to pop out of gear. So we're going to disassemble this. It needs to get cleaned up, and that the spring tension can be measured. This stuff's kind of gunky. So we'll get disassembly done, and I'll show you how to do these checks. So first thing is getting the gear selector off. So there's just it's actually 2 bolts, so I'm missing one in here. So obviously it's spring loaded. So the little cap, you got the little cover and a little spring that's obviously pretty potent, and then that gear shift lever comes right out. So this one's all nasty and in bad shape, but I do have another one of this, but I'll clean it up and use it for testing and everything. So we'll get all that stuff in the ultrasonic sink and then go ahead with further disassembly. So the way to get these arms out, there's 3 holes under here that covered by the gasket, which you can just barely see. So this is aluminum, so you want to be careful getting the gasket off. So I am going to use a razor blade here, but real flat to the gasket. And you can get in there and peel that up too, like I'm showing you there. Just get the gasket material off those screws, really is all you need to do. I'm not worried about cleaning up the gasket right now. I guess on some later gearboxes, and I think it's like TR6 later, these are not screws, they're dowels. So you would have to drill them out and then get new ones pressed in. So thankfully, at least these are a little bit more serviceable. And then take the flathead and we'll see if we can get these out. Yeah, nothing, that one's not tight at all. That one's not tight. And that one's not tight. So we'll get these out and get them bagged up individually so that I know what's what here. So I'm just going to essentially do, this is the reverse selector here. First, second, I think, and third, fourth. I'll double check that to make sure I'm not getting myself backwards there. And then once I get those screws out, I'll be able to get the arms out and then get these the forks off. So first and second selector, third and fourth, and then the reverse. So we'll do the first and second one first. So that little plug just unscrews. And then you've got the spring. Let me grab a little pick to get these things out. Got bags ready here to label them up so I maintain them. Alright, spring comes out. Then there's a ball down there and a spacer, so I'm going to have to flip it over, I think, to get that stuff out. Alright, there's the ball. And it actually doesn't appear that there's a spacer in here, so either the spacer is missing. Nope, the spacer's only in the third and fourth. So there you go, a little lesson learned for you. So let me get my bag labeled here. First and second gear. And of course I'll get these in the ultrasonic sink as well. Alright, now we'll do third and fourth. Alright, and there's the little spacer. Get a magnet here. Yep, trying to pick it up. Might not be strong enough. Yep, turn it over and knock it. That's not going to give me a hard time. I'll skip to reverse here. Don't believe there's a spacer in there. Oh, yep, sure is. That one's a little closer. A little easier to take out. And then the spring. All right, and this spring is quite a bit smaller. So we'll put that in the reverse gear. All right, able to get that one out. The spring is about the same diameter as the third and fourth gear, or excuse me, as the reverse gear. So those have the same tension, I believe. So now we need to get the selector forks loose, and once I get those loose, I'll be able to slide these tubes out, and they're like square nuts here, and they are in the best shape. We'll get on that. So somewhere along the way, I either mistakenly deleted it or something like that, but I'm post-overhaul here. But just to point out, the disassembling this stuff is not very difficult. I showed you how I took these out, and when I go to put these back in, you'll see it again. But if you notice, these peg bolts here are square, and all you're really doing is just loosening them up and then making sure everything's in neutral, and then pulling all the arms out and everything. Like I said, you'll see that as the video kind of goes on. But I want to make the point one, make sure you record everything and take a picture or something like that. I just took pictures. I didn't really write stuff down, so I might fumble around as the video goes on a little bit. But the peg bolts are square head, if you can tell. I'll zoom in on them real quick. So they're square head. So if you don't have a 12-point or an 8-point socket, it's very difficult, at least I found it, to get a wrench in here and not worry about stripping out anyway. So if you don't have a 12-point that's 3/8 of an inch or an 8-point, I would get those just to make this job easier. It's worth buying a single socket just for this job, just so you don't strip these things out and have problems with it. But you'll take those peg bolts out. There's peg, and the tubes, like I said, the bars will slide out after you make sure everything's in neutral. And then there's also peg screws that hold the actuators on the selector forks on the back. So sorry for either never recording that or deleting it by mistake or something like that. But here we go with putting everything back together, and I cleaned everything up too. So the top hat here, got it all cleaned up. Got 3 new O-rings that go in here, and it's not pressure bearing or anything. It just provides a seal for the oil that might slosh up and work its way up the one of the selector shafts. So the O-rings are approximately, figure out how big they are here, about a 1/2 inch inner diameter, 11/16 or so outer diameter, 3/32 or so thick. So there you go. So that's need 3 of those. And mine weren't in bad shape, but again, you know, for the 50 cents they were, it's worth doing it. So I'll get them lubricated, a little bit of oil, get them in there, and then the plate goes on, and it just gets tightened down like so. Not much to it. And the O-rings, by the way, I was able to pick up at my local hardware store, so you didn't have to order them. I'm sure you can get them. I didn't even look. Just went to the little O-ring drawer and matched them up with what I took out. All right, so there's that. And then, like I said, this little plate goes on just to hold that in. And you need to put this plate back on first, because once you put the shafts in there with all the selectors, it gets these bolts get hidden. Looks like the plate will shift on you a little bit. So I think what I'll do is I'll get the shafts in there a little bit, just to kind of start them, and I should still be able to get to the bolts. Right. So there's that, fresh O-rings. Now we'll start putting the selector forks back in, and then all the detents and all that kind of stuff. So this is probably where it's going to get fun. So now we'll start assembling the selector rods with the selectors on them themselves. Got the workshop manual to my left here off camera. You can't see it, but it's there. And the couple of these, the workshop manual is pretty easy to figure out if you didn't label them or whatever, which ones are which. You can see here this has kind of got like 2 detents, while the other 2 have 3. You want to make sure that you get your orientation right. So the detents are going to face down here, and then the selector goes on, and then it gets pegged in there with the peg bolt, And again, you want to make sure that you got your orientation right. Get that in there and get that tightened down. Again, using the 8-point socket. And these are pretty tight tolerant enough that you don't have to worry about getting it crooked. I think it's going to straighten out by itself pretty well. So there's that one. So then we'll get the, obviously this one, this is the first and second. That doesn't need, that's already pinned in there. And then we'll get this other one out and get that on there. All right, so we got the reverse. I think I may have misspoke. This center fork here is the third and fourth gear selector, and this is the first and second. So the first and second gets a selector and peg bolt. And I also found, just trial and error, the peg bolt will only fit in one side of this hole, which makes it almost idiot proof, but you can still put your selector upside down, right? But then you don't have any threads, so it's hard to get this wrong. All right, so again, the detents go toward the bottom when you're looking at the selectors, and they're going to be facing up. And then first, second one's going to go in the center like that. All right, so that's how it goes together. So there's that. So it tells you to do all that, and it says fit new O-rings and a new cover, which we've already done and showed you that. And then position the interlock plunger in the third top gear selector. So this one has got, this is the third top gear, and it's got that little hole in the middle there, and that's where that little plunger is going to go in. And that's that little guy, the little interlock. I know that's hard to see there, but that guy, put that in the middle there. I'm going to take this little pin over to the bench grinder and get it cleaned up a little bit. It doesn't look too pretty. All right, got that cleaned up. Going to put a little grease in there just to help it along. And insert the shaft into the top cover. All right, and you want the selector force to face down, and I want to lubricate the inside of that O-ring a little bit. Okay. All right, still got that little detent in there. All right, got that in. Engage the selector fork, distance piece, or distance tube, and secure the fork with peg bolt. So I got two different selector forks here. They are shaped a little bit different, and of course I didn't keep track of which one is which, so I got to go check out and see which one is which, and then we'll put that on there. All right, so the selector's fork with the cutout at the top, as opposed to the selector force with the protrusion from the top. That's the one that's going to go in here. But you got to get your distance piece in first. All your distance tubes here are, of course, all of different lengths. So you want to make sure that you recorded which lengths are which here. And the distance tube that you want to use for this first second is the longest one. All right, so the tube goes on. Then your selector fork. I'm going to line that up with the hole that's in there somewhere. There it is. And the peg bolt. All right, so that seems to move around reasonably easy, and your detents all get lined up. If I watch them, look down through that center hole there where the detent is going to go, and that's another way to check that your distance piece is correct. So that's the first detent, the second detent, and the last detent, and then it hits, right? So it only goes so far, and that appears to be all lined up. So now we have to fit the interlock ball between the reverse and third top selector bores, retaining them with grease. So this is going to be a little tricky. This is where you have to go in the inside here and put the balls in. So I'm going to try to do that without screwing it up. So what I should be able to do is just kind of put some grease in there and roll the ball in, and then hopefully it'll stay. But it's I don't know, it's an inch or two down that bore there, one on each side. I'm going to see if I can get the grease in there first. Just kind of paint it. And then I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the ball too, so it gets sticky, so that it doesn't roll all the way through on me. Obviously, I can't show you this. Apologize for that, but it's in there. All right, got that one. Again, I think if you roll it and get the ball sticky with grease, it'll help prevent it from getting away from you. Oh, like that one just did. Oh, where'd that go? No, we have a lost ball. So see if I can find that and come back. So if that happens, you can hear it rattle around in there, and I think there must be an empty cavity down in here. So I had to invert it, and then it rolled right out. So that was good. A little bit more grease on it, get a little stickier. Don't let it roll as much here. All right, so those are in there. Again, I wish I could show you that a little bit better, but I know that seemed to work. But that's what you do there. All right, so putting in the reverse selector. When you do that, you got to give room that the two interlock balls that we just put in. You got to give them room to go into the little detent on that on the center shaft here. So you want to make sure that this thing is just completely straight up and down, and it'll give that little bit of relief inside where that interlock, the little plunger went in there. So now that we've got that, and the reverse selector fork is a little bit different looking than the other ones. So that goes in first. And then the shortest of the tubes here. A little bit of oil on there just to keep it lubricated. All right, got that guy in. Next up, ensuring that the reversed and third top selector shafts are in their neutral position, which they are. Fit the second interlock ball, securing it with grease. I put both in. And then insert the first selector shaft in the top cover, passing the shaft through the first selector fork, and connect your fork and your tube. All right, so this is the longest tube, but your selector fork goes on first. Again, some lubrication. And another pick bolt. All right, so once you get it all together, a couple things to look at to do some rough checks to make sure you got it together right. One, it's obviously not going to go together in some parts without it being right. Two, you can check to make sure that your selector forks here are all, or not the selector forks, but the selectors here are all essentially flush and kind of together, and that should all line up. If one of those doesn't and you can't make it so, then you've got your tubes backwards or something like that. And the other thing, now this is in neutral here, so the other thing you can do, fit it back up to the gearbox and make sure that fits. So I'll point out some stuff on the gearbox here real quick. So here in the gearbox up here on the top is that reverse selector, so you want to make sure and just kind of look your reverse selectors all the way towards the back. And then right here and right here are where the selector forks, the two selector forks should go in. So you can always take the top hat, present it to the gearbox with everything in neutral, and make sure after some finagling that it fits and that everything appears to stay in neutral, which it does. So now you know that thing's together right. So next up here, we're going to put in the plungers and the ball to provide your detents. Except for the very earliest of gearboxes, it looks like about 10,000 or so, 9899. It used to be you had a ball, two balls, excuse me, and one plunger, and then they redesigned that and have made it now. You've got a ball and a long spring, and then two plungers and a short spring, and the little spacer in there. So just pay attention to that. I did not do a real good job of keeping track of stuff as it was coming out. So the tips of the plungers are a little bit different. but the heights are the same. Put the ball and the long spring in the first second. So the first second one is the only one with the ball. So again, making sure that you've got your first second selected properly. This guy here is your first second, the one that's closest to the back of the gearbox. So that's going to get the heavy spring, or the ball first and then the heavy spring. No spacer in that one. And then cap here, which I need to get a flathead screwdriver. And then the other stuff all gets the plungers like you see. So what I'm going to do, we'll look real quick. So looking at the grooves that are cut into the shafts, it looks like the reverse one has got a much wider cutout. So I'm going to go ahead and put the that style plunger in there with a flatter face. I'm going to put that in the reverse. Hold that up to you so you can see that a little bit better. If you can see that it's a flatter profile there, as opposed to this guy, which is a little bit more pointy. And then, like I said, looking into the shafts themselves, it looks like the pointy one is my 3rd, 4th, and the kind of the wider one is my reverse. So that's the way that I'm going to do that. So fit the plunger, short spring, and shin into the reverse selector shaft. So the plungers first, put those two in. Hey, how are you? All right, sorry about that, one of my adoring fans. So now we'll go ahead and do the plunger thing. I dropped the plunger in there. We'll do the, after the plunger, you do the spring, and the spring kind of fits inside the plunger a little bit. And then, spacer. All right, before I do this, what I wanted to do is I wanted to get some grease in there. So I'm going to pull these things back out and get these greased. All right, got all of them greased up. Go ahead and get it tightened down here. Tighten it down until it's flush, it says. But you can go deeper than that. So I'll get a little flat edge here to make sure I'm not going too far down. All right, that seems to work. So now the fun part. Now you have to check the spring tension. So I bought a cheapo scale here that's, you would use to weigh your luggage or something like that. And the only problem with this thing is it doesn't have like a max, couldn't find one that had like a max spring tension and then and it to freeze there without it costing entirely too much money. But the tension that you need for first and second is 32 to 34 pounds, and then the third and top and then the reverse are 26 to 28. So I don't know why they're different, but they are. So we'll start with the first and second here, and what I say, 32 to 34. That definitely wasn't 32 to 34 pounds, that's for sure. I think what I'm going to do real quick is just put this on a gearbox. I got my other one standing next to me here. Put it on and just kind of put the gear shift lever on and shift it around and see if it feels right to me. Got the gear shift selector in there. First and second seems very easy. Definitely easier than third and fourth. Reverse and third and fourth seem about the same. But no way is that 10 pounds of force. The idea here is the spring tension keeps the detent in that plunger and or the balls engaged so that the transmission doesn't pop out of gear. So I might be looking at having to get a new spring for the first and second. I don't know how I'm going to measure the force of reverse because I have to push the plunger this way, and I don't know how I can connect up the scale to pull. Maybe pull on the reverse fork in some way. I don't know. So, but I'm only getting maybe 10 pounds, and it really is not. Makes it hard without having this thing max out for me. It immediately comes off and I can't really get a measurement. So I'm going to take this gearbox or the selector back off the gear shift lever and try and mess with it a little bit more and see if I can get this thing lined up and give me some readings that I would trust. So that right there only gave me about 20 pounds. I took this piece of wire to wrap around, makes it a little easier. So 20 pounds is not sufficient. Way too light. Like I said, I think it's supposed to be 30 pounds for first and second. And then 27 or so for second and third. Let's see if I can get this to work for me. That was about 27, so that one looks okay. And again, I'm just trying to get lucky with looking at it. Yeah, so that's right about 27 pounds. So that one looks good. Third and fourth looks good, but the first and second's definitely too loose. Except for right now. Now it's going to 30. So you can see there what I tried to do. I tried to pull this, and because this guy was essentially in gear, it would not let me shift first or second because of that interlock and the two balls that are there. So at least nice to know that works. So get it in neutral. Now that we're in neutral, let's see what we get here. Yeah, it's 17 pounds or so. I wonder if I tighten this screw down, that'll make a difference. You're not supposed to do that. Yeah, that made a difference. So now it's going at about 27 pounds with that tightened down. But again, I don't think that's the point. I don't think the object is to tighten that screw down to adjust the spring tension. I think the object is to have it tight when you start. There, that's right about 30 pounds now, so another half a turn on that, and that would line that up. I don't know how to do reverse, but reverse feels okay. If you guys have any ideas on how I can make, well, here, let's try this. That doesn't seem to be working for me, but reverse feels about the same as second and third did, or third and fourth does, which is, they're supposed to be the same. So it's just first and second that's way too soft. So I'll look into getting a new spring, but otherwise, or steal it out of the other gearbox maybe and try it again. But that's how I do it. If you guys have any ideas on how I might be able to hook this up to be able to measure the reverse, I'm all ears. But I think otherwise I'm going to be okay. And especially with the detent in reverse, it's not like I'm going to stay in reverse for that long. And if it pops out, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. But anyway, that's how you rebuild the top cover there, and all the things that go into it. And it's pretty good deal of engineering involved and just being able to select gears. So that's all I got for today. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.